The battlefield was silent now, but the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, filled with smoke, broken weapons, and the smell of death. Under the twisted metal of a ruined ship, an alien woman lay almost motionless. Her body was bruised, her armor cracked, and her once bright eyes had lost their fire. Her own kind had abandoned her when she was no longer useful. They left her behind like a broken tool, a piece of trash in the middle of the wasteland. She had no strength to move, no reason to hope. In her mind she whispered again and again, "This is the end. No one will care if I disappear." But she was wrong. A shadow moved through the wreckage. Slow footsteps echoed on the broken ground. It was a human, covered in dust, carrying a small pack on his back. His clothes were torn, his hands dirty, yet his eyes still burned with life. He was searching, though not for treasure, not for victory, but for survivors. Unlike many others who fled the battle, this man stayed behind. When his gaze fell upon her, he froze. She looked half dead, a creature from another world, with scars across her skin and strange marks glowing faintly on her arms. Any other human would have turned away in fear. They would have said, "She's not one of us. She doesn't matter." But he did not. He bent down, brushing away the ash around her. She opened her eyes weakly, expecting to see another cruel face, expecting to hear mocking words. Instead, she saw concern. She saw someone looking at her not as a monster, not as trash, but as someone in pain. "You're alive," he whispered, his voice low but firm. She tried to speak, but only a faint sound left her throat. Her people had thrown her away. Why would this human care? She expected him to walk away after a single glance, but he reached into his pack, pulled out a small canteen of water, and carefully lifted her head. "Drink," he said. She could not believe it. This fragile creature, so much weaker than her species, was holding her with such care. The water burned her throat at first, but slowly she felt a spark of life return. She stared at him with suspicion. Why was he helping her? What did he want? She had nothing to offer. "Still," he continued, wrapping his worn jacket around her trembling body. The night air was cold, but he gave her the only protection he had. As the fire from the ruins crackled nearby, the human looked at the sky. Enemy patrols could arrive at any time. Staying here was dangerous. Yet he did not leave her. Instead, he whispered softly, as if promising her something no one else ever had. "You're safe now." For her, those words were almost impossible to believe. Safe? She had never been safe, not even among her own kind. She had been trained as a fighter, used for battles, praised only when she was strong, discarded when she was weak. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with warmth instead of command, with kindness instead of cold orders. The human shifted her weight onto his shoulder and tried to stand. She was heavy, far stronger and larger than him, but he did not give up. His legs shook, his breath grew heavy, but he took step after step. Every move showed his determination. She could feel his heart racing, could hear his breath struggling, but still he carried her. The ruins stretched endlessly, every corner filled with danger, but he did not stop. When his foot slipped on the rubble, he pulled her closer to keep her from falling. When the sharp wind bit into his skin, he only tightened the jacket around her. She had never felt such protection. As they moved, her mind began to fight against the thoughts she carried for years. Why is he doing this? Why doesn't he throw me away like the others did? Each time her body weakened and her eyes tried to close, his voice called her back. "Stay awake. You'll make it. I've got you." The human was not powerful like the soldiers who had abandoned her. He had no shining armor, no great weapons, no command over armies. But in his arms she felt something she had never known: value. To him she was not trash, not a burden. She was someone precious enough to fight for. The night stretched long and the path ahead was uncertain. But for the first time, lying against this stranger's shoulder, she allowed a small thought to grow inside her broken heart. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there is someone who sees me, someone who believes I am more than nothing. The battlefield behind them faded into shadows, and a new story began, one that neither of them could have imagined. The night was colder than he expected. The human's breath turned into mist as he carried the alien woman through the wreckage. His steps were heavy, his body trembling under her weight, but his grip around her never loosened. Every step was a silent battle, against exhaustion, against fear, and against the voices in his mind telling him to let go. The alien woman watched him closely through half-closed eyes. She was stronger by nature, built for war, yet in this moment she was powerless. She could not understand why he carried her. In her world, weakness was a shame. If someone fell behind, they were left to die. That was the law of survival among her people. Yet here was this fragile human, smaller, weaker, and still refusing to abandon her. He stumbled on a broken piece of metal, falling to his knees. She felt her body jolt as he almost dropped her. For a second, she thought he would finally give up. But then he gritted his teeth, pushed himself back up, and whispered, "Not yet. You'll make it." His voice was hoarse, but there was fire in it. That fire confused her. Why would someone who owed her nothing fight so hard? She tested his resolve, her voice faint but sharp. "Why? Save me." He glanced at her, sweat running down his face. "Because you're alive," he answered simply. No long speech, no complicated reason, just those words, alive. That word struck her like a blade. Her own people had looked at her as if she were already dead, as if her life had no meaning. Yet this human carried her as if her heartbeat mattered more than anything else. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her chest. They reached a small ruined shelter, half covered with collapsed walls. He laid her down gently on a piece of cloth he had pulled from his pack. His hands shook as he reached for a small kit, old bandages, a few herbs, and a broken tool he used as a blade. He wasn't a healer, but he tried. Carefully, he cleaned the blood on her arm, wrapping it in strips of cloth. She hissed in pain, her sharp voice echoing in the small space. She expected him to pull away in fear. Instead, he tightened the bandage and said softly, "Pain means you're still fighting." The alien woman stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Pain was always punishment in her world. But here, pain was proof of life. The night stretched on. Outside, distant engines roared, scouts searching the ruins. Danger was close, but he didn't rest. He sat near her, keeping watch, ready to protect a stranger he barely knew. She could feel his exhaustion, see the way his shoulders sagged. Yet when her breathing grew shallow, his hand reached for hers. Just to let her know she was not alone, her instincts screamed at her to pull away. Trust was weakness. Trust had betrayed her before. But something in his touch felt different. Not control. Not power. Just comfort. For the first time, she didn't pull back. Hours passed. The wind howled through the broken walls, carrying whispers of fear. She turned her gaze toward him, his silhouette outlined by the dim light of a fading fire. His eyes were still open, scanning the shadows. He was ready to face danger, not for himself, but for her. And that was when the spark lit inside her, small, fragile, but real. A spark of trust, she whispered, almost too soft to hear. "You are strange." He chuckled weakly, shaking his head. "I've heard that before." For the first time, a tiny smile tugged at her lips. It surprised her. She hadn't smiled in years, not since she was thrown away like nothing. She turned her face away quickly, hiding it, but the warmth lingered in her chest. The human leaned back, his eyes finally closing for a brief moment of rest. She watched him in silence, studying his fragile form. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths. He was not strong like her kind, not built for war. But his strength was something else, something deeper. A strength that came from refusing to give up on another life. As sleep pulled at her tired eyes, one last thought came to her. If this human sees value in me, maybe I can believe it too. And for the first time in her broken life, she allowed herself to sleep. Not in fear, but in the faint safety of trust. The morning sun rose slowly over the ruined horizon. Its light touched the broken battlefield, turning the ash into dull gold. The human helped the alien woman stand, though her legs still shook. She leaned on him, every step a reminder of her weakness, every breath a reminder of his strength. They left the ruins behind and walked toward the city. The city was alive, full of noise and restless people. Markets opened with the sound of voices calling out prices. Children laughed in the streets, soldiers marched down the stone roads, and merchants shouted to anyone who would listen. It was a place of survival, but also of fear. Fear that always looked for a target. And the moment she stepped into the open streets, she became that target. Heads turned instantly. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The alien's tall figure, her scars and the faint glow of the markings on her skin drew sharp gasps. Mothers pulled their children close. Traders closed their stalls in haste. Soldiers placed their hands on their weapons. Whispers rose quickly like poison carried on the wind. She doesn't belong here. Monster. Why would a human bring that thing into the city? Her chest tightened. She had known rejection before, but this was worse. These were strangers, and yet their eyes pierced her with the same coldness as her own people when they abandoned her. She wanted to shrink into the shadows, to disappear. She waited for the human to let go of her arm, to step away and leave her to the hatred of the crowd. But he didn't. He tightened his grip around her hand and moved closer, placing himself between her and the crowd. His voice cut through the whispers, calm but firm. "She's with me." The words were simple but powerful. To the alien woman, they were a shield stronger than steel. For the first time in her life, someone had claimed her not as a tool, not as a weapon, not as trash, but as a companion worth standing beside. The crowd didn't like it. A man shouted, "You're protecting an enemy. Do you even know what she is?" The human didn't flinch. His eyes locked on the man, steady as stone. "I know enough. I know she's alive. I know she's hurt. And that's all that matters." The alien woman felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She wanted to speak, to tell him how much those words meant, but her throat tightened. All she could do was watch him. Watch the way he stood against his own kind just to defend her. The soldiers stepped forward now, suspicion heavy in their eyes. One of them pointed his weapon. "She's dangerous. We can't allow her inside. Step aside, human." For a moment, fear rushed through her. This was it. He would finally give her up. No human would risk his life against his own city's guards. But once again, he surprised her. He stood taller, his voice stronger than before. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The soldiers exchanged glances, uncertain. He had no weapon, no armor, no rank, yet something in his voice carried a weight they couldn't ignore. The crowd murmured louder, torn between fear and curiosity. The alien woman's heart pounded. She had never seen someone so fragile look so unbreakable. In that moment, she realized the truth. His strength was not in his body, but in his heart. The soldiers finally lowered their weapons, unwilling to cause chaos in the middle of the streets. "Fine," one muttered, "but she stays close to you. If anything happens, it's on your head." The human nodded, but his eyes never left theirs until they stepped back. Then he turned to her, his tone softer. "You're safe with me. Don't listen to them." Her chest tightened again, but not from pain. From something unfamiliar, something she could not yet name. She lowered her gaze and whispered almost too quietly, "Why?" He smiled, a tired but honest smile. "Because everyone deserves someone who believes in them." Her throat ached, her eyes burned. She turned her face away quickly, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. In her world, tears were weakness. But with him, they felt different. They felt like the beginning of something new. That day, as the city's eyes followed them with suspicion and hatred, she walked not alone, but beside a human who refused to let her go. And though the world hated her for the first time, she began to believe she might have a place in it. The days that followed were not easy. Every street they walked through carried stares. Every shadow carried whispers. The alien woman felt the weight of countless eyes on her, always waiting for her to make a wrong move. Yet through all of it, the human stayed close, his presence like a barrier against the world. At first, she thought it was only pity. Humans were known for their strange emotions, kindness, sympathy, foolish courage. But soon she noticed something different. His kindness was not forced. His care was not because he wanted something in return. It was simple, natural, like the way one breathes without thinking. He showed her small things that she had never known. On the first night in the city, he gave her a blanket even though he had none for himself. He slept on the cold floor, shivering while she lay warmer than she had in years. When she asked him why, he only smiled. "You need it more." In the mornings, he cooked what little food they could find. He always gave her the larger portion, pushing his own share aside with a shrug. She had never been offered food without being expected to fight or work in return. The gesture left her silent, confused yet strangely grateful. One evening, as they sat near a dim fire in a quiet alley, she noticed his hands. They were rough, marked with scars and burns. His life had not been easy. Still, those same hands had carried her, fed her, protected her. She studied them for a long time before asking softly, "Why do you not fear me?" He looked up, his expression calm. "Fear blinds people. I'd rather see who you are than what they say you are." Those words struck her deeper than any weapon ever had. No one had ever asked who she was. No one had ever cared. The alien woman began to change in small ways. She still spoke little, her words heavy with caution, but she watched him closely. When he laughed at something simple, a child chasing a dog or the way a merchant argued too loudly, She felt something stir inside her. It was unfamiliar, but it warmed her. She found herself waiting for those small moments of laughter. At night, when danger lurked in the silence, she stayed awake to watch over him. He thought she slept, but her eyes followed every movement in the dark. For the first time, she wanted to protect someone. Not because of duty, not because of orders, but because she chose to. One evening, when the fire was nearly out, he turned to her and asked, "Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air. Trust was a word she had never believed in. Trust meant chains, betrayal, and being discarded. But when she looked at him, at the way he carried her through hatred, at the way he shared everything without hesitation, she realized her answer. Slowly, she nodded. Yes, the human smiled gently. Then that's enough. Her chest tightened with an emotion she could not name. She felt as if the heavy chains of her past had cracked just a little. She was not free yet, but the weight was lighter when he was beside her. As days passed, the bond between them grew stronger. It was not built on words because words were few. It was built on actions, on quiet moments, on the way he never let her walk behind him, always beside him. On the way he stood tall when others mocked, and on the way she found herself standing taller too. One night under the stars, she whispered something almost too soft for him to hear. "Maybe I was wrong about your kind." He glanced at her with curiosity. "Wrong how?" She hesitated, then said, "I thought humans were weak." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "We are, but sometimes weakness teaches us to hold on tighter." For the first time she smiled openly, not hidden, not forced. A real smile. It surprised her as much as it surprised him. He didn't say anything about it. He only smiled back as if that single moment was enough. And it was. The bond had grown, not with fire or battle, but with small sparks that refused to die. She had been thrown away, treated as nothing. But with him, she was beginning to learn what it meant to be seen as someone precious. The days of fragile peace did not last. It began with whispers in the city. Traders who had once only stared, now looked at the alien woman with fear sharper than before. Rumors spread like fire. Her kind is searching for her. They want her back, and they won't stop until they find her. She felt it before anyone told her. A shadow at the edge of the market. The sensation of eyes following her steps. Her instincts, sharpened from years of war, told her danger was near. That night she could not sleep. She sat in silence, her back against the wall, watching the stars while the human rested. The thought gnawed at her. If they came, they would not only try to take her, they would destroy him too. By the third day, the truth revealed itself. They came at dusk, her own people. Tall armored, their glowing eyes filled with fury. The city fell silent as they entered the streets, their heavy footsteps echoing like drums of war. The crowd scattered, doors slammed shut, but still, curious eyes peeked from shadows. Everyone knew this was not a fight meant for humans. She froze when she saw them. Once she had stood beside them as a soldier, obeying every order, spilling blood without question. Now they looked at her as if she were a traitor, less than dirt. One of them stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp. "You were discarded. You should have died where we left you. Yet here you are, filthy, standing beside a human." The alien woman felt shame burn in her chest, but before she could speak, the human stepped in front of her. His stance was small compared to their towering forms, but his voice was steady. "She's with me. She stays." A ripple of disbelief went through the crowd. The aliens laughed, cruel and mocking. "You dare claim what belongs to us? She is nothing. Trash. And you, human, are weaker than the air we breathe." But the human didn't move. His eyes burned with quiet defiance. "If she was nothing, you wouldn't be here. You're afraid because she is more than you'll admit. She deserves better than the way you treated her." Her heart pounded at his words. No one had ever spoken like that for her. Not even she herself believed she was worth so much. The alien leader snarled, stepping closer. "Step aside, human. She comes with us. If you resist, you die." The human's fists clenched at his sides. His body trembled, but not from fear. From determination. He glanced back at her just for a second, his eyes meeting hers. And in that single look, she understood he was ready to die for her. "No," he said firmly. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The words struck her like thunder. Her own people, warriors who had trained beside her, looked down at the fragile man standing in their way. They laughed again, ready to crush him with ease. but she felt something awaken inside her, a storm long buried. She had been abandoned, broken, left to rot. Yet this one human, fragile and scarred, gave her something they never did: value. And now, because of her, his life was at risk. She could not let that happen. The alien woman stepped forward, standing beside the human. Her body still weak, her strength not fully returned, but her spirit blazing. She spoke in her native tongue, her voice carrying through the night air. You left me to die. You called me worthless, yet here I stand alive because of him. If you touch him, you will answer to me. The silence that followed was heavy. Her people stared at her, shocked that she would dare defy them for a human. Rage twisted their faces. The leader raised his weapon. Then you will fall with him. The human didn't back away. He raised no weapon, only lifted his hands into a fighting stance, ready to face certain death. She looked at him, and for the first time in her life, she felt something stronger than fear, stronger than pain. She felt belonging. The night burned with tension as the two sides stood face to face, an abandoned alien who found her worth, and a fragile human who refused to let her go. The fight was about to begin, and the world would soon learn what it meant when someone treated the forgotten as precious. The air was sharp with tension. The city's narrow street had turned into a silent stage. On one side stood the alien warriors, tall and armored, their weapons glowing faintly in the fading light. On the other stood the human and the woman they had abandoned. For a moment, no one moved. Then the leader of the alien warriors stepped forward, his blade rising like a streak of light. With a roar, the fight began. The human was fast but not strong. He dodged the first strike, pulling the alien woman behind him. The blade struck the ground, sparks flying. The crowd gasped, hiding behind shutters and walls, watching a fragile man face giants. He fought with nothing but his fists and his will. Each time he blocked, pain shot through his arms. Each time he struck, it was like hitting solid rock. But still he did not stop. He moved with desperation, with stubborn courage, protecting her with his own body. The alien woman's heart pounded as she watched him. She could see every weakness, every flaw. He was bleeding already, a cut across his shoulder, another across his side. His knees buckled, his breathing grew ragged. Against trained warriors, he should have fallen within seconds. Yet he refused. Every time they tried to reach her, he stepped in front, taking the blow, shielding her. Why? She cried, her voice trembling. You can't win? Through gritted teeth, he answered. I don't have to win. I just have to keep you safe. The words shattered something deep inside her. No one had ever chosen her over their own life, not once. Until now, the alien warriors laughed cruelly as the human staggered. One of them struck hard and he fell to his knees, coughing blood. The sight tore through her like a blade. She had been called worthless, treated as trash, left to rot. But here was this fragile human, broken and bleeding, proving with every wound that she was not worthless, that she was worth everything. Her chest burned. Her vision blurred, and then something inside her broke. Or perhaps it awakened. A roar escaped her throat, one that shook the air itself. Her markings flared with blinding light, brighter than ever before. The power she had buried, the strength she had once feared, surged back into her veins. Her people had thrown her away because they feared this very power, and now she understood why. She rose, standing tall beside the human. Her eyes glowed, her body trembling with energy. The warrior stepped back, momentarily uncertain. The human looked up at her through blood and pain, his lips curling into the faintest smile. I knew you weren't nothing. Those words lit the fire fully. She unleashed her strength, her body moving faster than the eye could follow. The first warrior fell with a single strike, his weapon shattering under her glowing hand. The second tried to attack, but she turned his own force against him, sending him crashing into the stone walls. They had abandoned her, discarded her, called her weak, but now she stood unbroken, more alive than ever. Every movement was not just rage, it was purpose. She wasn't fighting for them anymore. She wasn't fighting for pride. She was fighting for him, for the fragile human who saw her as precious when no one else did. The leader roared and charged, his blade slicing the air. She met him head-on, the ground trembling beneath their clash. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a cry that shook the street, she shattered his weapon into pieces. Her hand gripped his armor, pulling him close. You will never touch him again, she hissed, her voice echoing with power. She threw him aside, broken and defeated. Silence fell across the city. The crowd who had once whispered in hate now stood frozen in awe, Her chest heaved, her power slowly dimming. She turned to the human, dropping to her knees beside him. His blood stained the ground, his face pale, but his eyes still held that same fire. She pressed her hand to his wound, her voice breaking. "Why did you do this? Why give so much for me?" His lips moved weakly, but his words were clear enough. "Because no one deserves to be thrown away." Tears she had never allowed herself to shed finally spilled down her face. She held him close, her heart breaking yet burning with something new. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be truly precious. The battle was over. But the real change had just begun. The street was quiet after the battle. Smoke rose in thin trails from broken walls, and shattered weapons lay scattered across the ground. The alien warriors were gone, defeated, humiliated, their leader crawling away with shattered pride. For the first time, the city saw something it had never expected. A human and an alien woman standing together, not as enemies, but as something more. The alien woman knelt beside the human, her hands trembling as they pressed against his wounds. His blood stained her fingers, but she did not care. All her life she had been trained to fight, to destroy, to obey. But now all she wanted was to keep him alive. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You cannot leave me now. Not after everything." His eyes flickered open, weak but steady. A faint smile curved his lips. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured. "Stronger than all of them." Tears blurred her vision. She shook her head, her chest aching. "No, it was you. You gave me the strength." Around them, the crowd began to emerge from hiding. Men, women, even children stepped into the open. Their eyes no longer held only fear. Some looked with awe. Some with shame. A few even with respect. They had seen the fragile human bleed for someone they called an enemy. They had seen the alien woman protect the city instead of destroying it. Whispers spread again, but this time the words were different. "She fought for him. She saved us too. Maybe she isn't what we thought." The alien woman heard them, and for the first time the voices did not cut her. Instead, they felt like the soft beginning of acceptance. The human tried to rise, but his body betrayed him. She quickly lifted him in her arms, carrying him as he once carried her. Every step she took through the streets was steady, proud, unafraid. The same people who had spat hate now stepped aside in silence, watching her walk with dignity. When they reached the small shelter they had once shared, she laid him gently on the bed of cloth. She cleaned his wounds with careful hands, each movement filled with a gentleness she never knew she had. He winced, but never complained. His eyes stayed on her, calm, trusting. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, her voice soft, almost embarrassed. He chuckled faintly. "Because I want to remember this. The moment you finally see yourself the way I see you." Her breath caught. She turned away, unable to meet his gaze. But in her heart she knew he was right. For the first time she saw herself not as broken, not as abandoned, not as nothing. She saw herself as someone who mattered, someone who was precious. Days passed and the city slowly changed around them. People still stared, but fewer with fear. Some even offered food, blankets, or quiet nods of respect. The human's wounds began to heal, though scars remained. And every night when the stars filled the sky, she sat beside him, guarding his sleep as he once guarded hers. One evening, as the fire crackled between them, he spoke softly. "What will you do now? You're free. You don't have to stay." The question hit her harder than a blade. Free? Yes, she was free. But freedom without him felt like emptiness. She shook her head. "Where would I go? My people left me. I have no home." He looked at her with the same calm strength he always carried. "Then stay. With me." Her chest tightened, a warmth spreading through her body. She had never belonged anywhere, but in that moment she realized belonging was not a place. It was a person, and she had found hers. She nodded slowly. "Yes, with you." The fire crackled louder, the stars shone brighter, and the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. The galaxy was wide, filled with countless battles, endless hatred, and cold emptiness. But somewhere in that vastness, a fragile human and an abandoned alien had found each other. Their story would not be forgotten. Not by the city that had witnessed their courage. Not by the enemies who had learned to fear their bond. And not by the stars that now carried their secret. Because once she had been thrown away like nothing. But because of him she would forever be remembered as someone precious, and this was only the beginning.